It's been nothing short of a stunning day in state politics. In a shock announcement, Gladys Berejiklian resigned as Premier, saying she had no choice. Jeremy Fernandez is tonight at State Parliament. Jeremy, what an extraordinary series of events.
Kirsten, Gladys Berejiklian says her departure couldn't come at a worse time for New South Wales. Today, the corruption watchdog, the ICAC, announced it's investigating her. Within an hour, Gladys Berejiklian had quit as Premier and she'll be leaving politics altogether. Our state political reporter Ashleigh Raper begins tonight's coverage.
Gladys Berejiklian has weathered bushfires, a pandemic and personal controversy. But the political career of New South Wales's first female elected Premier has been brought to a brutal end.
I have no option but to resign from the office of Premier. Resigning at this time is against every instinct in my being and something which I do not want to do. I love my job and I love serving the community.
She resigned 1 hour after the Independent Commission Against Corruption announced she was the subject of an investigation.
My resignation as Premier could not occur at a worse time, but the timing is completely outside of my control, as the ICAC has chosen to take this action during the most challenging weeks of the most challenging times in the state's history.
The ICAC is holding further hearings in its corruption inquiry into the Premier's ex-boyfriend, Darryl Maguire. This time around, though, it'll focus on whether Ms Berejiklian breached the public trust and had a conflict between her public and personal life, in particular in regards to 2 grants for Mr Maguire's electorate of Wagga Wagga. One was for the Clay Target Association when Gladys Berejiklian was Treasurer, the other the Riverina Conservatorium of Music when she was Premier.
I want to be very clear. In all the decisions I have ever made as a Minister or as Premier of New South Wales, my first consideration has always been the well-being and welfare of the people of this state. I state categorically I've always acted with the highest level of integrity.
Unlike other MPs, she's decided not to wait around on the crossbench while the investigation is finalised.
Standing aside is not an option for me as the Premier of New South Wales. The people of this state need certainty as to who their leader is during the challenging times of the pandemic.
Gladys is a dear friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time. She has displayed heroic qualities as the Premier of New South Wales.
Now Gladys Berejiklian will not only leave the top job but Parliament altogether. She's stepping down as the member for Willoughby after being the representative for the safe Liberal seat on the Lower North Shore for more than 18 years. This is a swift end from a leader who not long ago seemingly saw off a pandemic and had a firm grip on power.
So as I address you for the final time as your Premier, please stay the course and stay safe. Thank you again for giving me the honour of being your Premier. Thank you very much.
And with that went the third Liberal Premier since the Coalition took power 10 years ago.
Ashleigh Raper is with me now. Ashleigh, did anyone really see this coming today?
Jeremy, it is an extraordinary turn of events, but not wholly unexpected. There had been speculation and concern within government ranks that the ICAC could make an announcement like it did today after the Premier gave evidence to the corruption watchdog last year. But it doesn't make it any less shocking that a leader who has at times enjoyed incredible popularity and until recently was considered the gold standard for COVID management is now out of the job with a cloud hanging over her head.
So let's cast ahead. Who are the likely candidates to replace her and when will that happen?
The Planning Minister, Rob Stokes, has been the only person to confirm he wants the job, and he was quick to make that clear today. His biggest competition will be the Treasurer, Dominic Perrottet. He's always been the heir apparent, but is yet to state his intention to run. He's from the right faction, and to take the job as Premier, he will need to strike a deal with the moderates, which is the dominant faction, and it's also the faction that Rob Stokes is from. Now, there are other ministers potentially eyeing off the job, Stuart Ayres, Mark Speakman and Andrew Constance, and there are a lot of phone calls being made, the numbers are being done, and the Liberals are set to meet on Tuesday morning, but there is a feeling within the party that they want this sorted before then.
Ashleigh Raper, thank you. So what do people in Gladys Berejiklian's electorate think of all these developments? Cayman Gock joins us from Northbridge now. Cayman, how are people there reacting to today's news?
Shock and sympathy for the most part, Jeremy, as The news sunk in. People gathered outside of her electorate office here in Northbridge with flowers and signs. The announcement came as a surprise to a lot of locals, but there were mixed emotions out on the street, many of whom were very supportive and understanding as to why she resigned, but some said it should have happened sooner following the revelations of her private relationship with former MP Daryl Maguire. Nevertheless, Gladys Berejiklian has represented the people of Willoughby for nearly 2 decades. Now many are grappling with why they've not only lost their member, but their premier.
I was upset, actually, because I think she's done a really good job.
I feel sorry for her, honestly, because she's a human and she's just doing the best that she can. And there's no way that you can do that job unscathed.
I mean, it was the right thing to do, but I think it should have happened a lot earlier.
Something's happened in the past. I guess that's caught up with her. Don't know what it is, but I guess that's going to come out.
She's shown good leadership and has been very strong under really difficult circumstances. I'm not sure if her successor can stand up to that, to be honest, and whoever that might be.
And in an odd tribute on this gloomy night, some of her supporters are posting videos of them putting jackets out the front of their home as a show of respect for the outgoing Premier. Jeremy?
Cayman, thank you. So how did it all come to this? Kathleen Calderwood looks back on the events that led to a corruption inquiry into the Premier.
Ever since the Premier revealed she'd been in a secret relationship, there's been a cloud of questions looming over her.
I would like to say at the outset that Mr Maguire was a colleague of 15 years. He was someone that I trusted, and that developed into a close personal relationship.
The key one being, did she have an undeclared conflict of interest?
William tells me we've done our deal, so hopefully that's about half of all that gone now.
That's good. I don't need to know about that bit.
No, you don't.
Today's announcement she is the subject of an ICAC investigation was all about Daryl Maguire's former electorate of Wagga Wagga. In December 2016, $5.5 million was reserved under the Restart New South Wales Fund, which was overseen by then Treasurer Gladys Berejiklian. In January 2017, Mr Maguire put out a press release announcing the government would help fund the Australian Clay Target Association's clubhouse and convention centre. In August that year, the club was officially awarded the $5 million. Through a company Mr Maguire was a secret director of, it's alleged he may have stood to gain a commission from the development of the clubhouse. Over the past few months, Ms Berejiklian's once emphatic denial she was being investigated by the ICAC gradually dissolved.
It is not appropriate for anyone to comment on activity which the Integrity Agency is undertaking. Let them do their work. I have nothing to add further.
At a time when this government is already under increased scrutiny over the way it administers grants, today's events have raised further questions about a culture of pork barrelling at Macquarie Street.
We need to ensure that New South Wales finally learns the lessons of the past, that these kind of pork barrelling scandals are toxic in the eyes of the public. And they don't just bring down one Premier, they bring down the entire political establishment in New South Wales.
A parliamentary inquiry is currently looking into the $250 million Stronger Communities Fund, the vast majority of which went to coalition or marginal electorates ahead of the 2019 election.
Well, I think all governments and all oppositions make commitments to the community in order to curry favour. I think that's part of the political process, whether we like it or not.
Words the outgoing Premier may come to regret. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News, Sydney.
As the daughter of migrants, Gladys Berejiklian has been the very model of a multicultural Australian success story. She would go on to become the first female elected as Premier of New South Wales. Sarah Gerrathy looks back on her career.
For a time, she was invincible.
Someone with a long surname and a woman can be the Premier of New South Wales.
Years after a 21-year-old Gladys Berejiklian dressed as Superwoman, she became a real-life hero for her party, leading them to an historic third term in office and becoming the first woman to be elected Premier in New South Wales.
How good is Gladys Berejiklian?
She'd taken over the top job 2 years earlier after Mike Baird's shock resignation. It was a huge moment for the daughter of Armenian parents who'd moved to Australia in the 1960s.
When I started school, I couldn't speak English. I remember my mother said to me, don't worry if you don't really understand what the teacher says, put up your hand and have a go.
Gladys Berejiklian had been school captain, president of the Young Liberals and a Commonwealth Bank executive before Parliament came calling in 2003. She scraped over the line by just 144 votes to win the seat of Willoughby, before rising to the opposition front bench and being appointed Transport Minister when the Coalition swept to power in 2011.
It's Kerry O'Brien here. Can you hear me?
I can, Kerry, and I'm only going to talk to Gladys. Are you OK with that?
As Minister, she introduced the Opal card.
It's good to hear all the beeps, Opal Man.
And oversaw complex and sometimes controversial projects. When Barry O'Farrell resigned over a bottle of wine, Gladys Berejiklian passed up a shot at the leadership, instead becoming the state's first female treasurer. By the time she replaced Mike Baird as Premier, the Coalition brand had taken a beating.
No forced amalgamations!
And she wasn't afraid to backflip on the policies causing it the most pain.
Hand on heart, as a member of the government who took that decision, I feel we could have addressed that issue differently.
Her popularity with voters soared in times of crisis as she steered the state through its worst ever bushfire season and a global pandemic.
New South Wales is the gold standard.
Then came what the intensely private Premier described as her own personal nightmare. A corruption inquiry exposed her 5-year secret relationship with disgraced MP Daryl Maguire.
I'm human and I stuffed up in my personal life.
You've turned a blind eye to corruption.
The scandal would have quickly ended the career of many other politicians, but opinion polls showed voters bought the Premier's lament that she was only human.
John has phoned in. John, good morning to you. You're talking with the Premier.
Gladys, don't pull a pin. You got our 110% support.
Gladys Berejiklian lived to fight another day, although her squeaky clean reputation as a stickler for the rules would never be quite the same again. Sarah Geraghty, ABC News.
Let's bring in Ashleigh Raper again. Ashleigh, what can we make of the ICAC's timing and what happens next?
Gladys Berejiklian, Jeremy, certainly made her displeasure at the timing of the announcement very clear today, but the ICAC is an independent body and it's not the first time it's dared to take on a Premier. Nick Greiner and Barry O'Farrell both lost their premierships as a result of the ICAC and their investigations. Now, Gladys Berejiklian has stepped down ahead of public hearings. They're scheduled to take place from the 18th of October, over 10 days. So, Jeremy, Gladys Berejiklian's time in the spotlight is not over just yet.